The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are back for another week of Music Weekly, number 36 overall for the year. This is episode 105 of the Nerdcast Empire, live on twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire every Sunday night, at least most every Sunday night. And we'll be bringing you the best rock and metal releases from October the 4th as we are into the month of October this week on Music Weekly. Great stuff this week. Before we get to the music release, we've got some news and notes around the rock and metal world to talk about before we get there. Joining me in studio, the guy who puts all this together each and every week, it's Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, man, it's going. Good week for music. A lot of variety, a lot of crazy stuff. Was kind of enjoyable finding new bands and then finding other stuff on top of that wasn't even new releases, other songs they've done that just kind of blew my mind and made me regret not having found them sooner. But yeah, can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, really good stuff this week. Some weird stuff out there for sure. And when we get to the new music, we'll put the playlist in the chat on Twitch, but we'll also put it on the YouTube link as well and the card. But there's definitely some things that, it was kind of out there. I think there are some bands this week that people will maybe listen to the playlist and find their own two songs maybe more readily this week than some other weeks because there's just so much stuff out there. So we'll get to all that coming up in the second part of the show. But before we do that, we've got some news items to talk about. Nothing real heavy this week, but we're going to get to just a few general news items, and I like my rundown headline for this one. It just says streaming tool, which doesn't really explain what this story is, but it is a story from Metal Injection that quotes an interview with Maynard James Keenan, the vocalist for Tool, talking about the fact that this band, as kind of famously, resisted putting a lot of their music catalog on streaming services for many years. And the article kind of laments the fact that their music wasn't as easily accessible as many of their contemporaries of their time. And finally, in 2019, they did get around to getting all of their stuff uploaded, and everything charted almost immediately as their fans rushed to kind of get it in digital form for the first time. And it brings up a couple points because obviously he's going to talk in the article, and I'll post the link to the article once I toss it over to Mike, about maybe some missed opportunities to make new fans during that time. But it does make you wonder when we look at the landscape of modern music and we talk about the effects of streaming. We've detailed on this show how streaming music doesn't really earn a whole lot of money, as Chris joins us from Parts Unknown. Great to have Chris along with us once again.
Yeah, watch out for the alligators.
Definitely watch out for them. They're dangerous this time of year for sure. Obviously, the streaming thing is something that we're probably never going to know the exact effects of, because we know that bands don't make much money off of it, but the amount of exposure it earns some bands and what that does to their physical sales is I'm not sure something we're going to be able to quantify anytime soon, but definitely curious to get your thoughts, and I'm sure Chris will chime in as well, as Tool's one of his favorite bands, but kind of curious your thoughts on whether this was a mistake, whether we really would know it's a mistake, or if it's not a combination of a lot of different factors with Tool.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder how things would have played out otherwise, because I'm sure there's a point in time where people just aren't buying your new CDs or vinyl anymore, where, especially with a band like Tool, who's had such a sporadic catalog. I mean, he talks about them not being streaming until 2019, but it's like at the same time, you released one album in 2001, one in 2006. Like, when you're talking about young people not knowing who you are, that could also be part of it, is you just never got around to releasing all that much music. I recall, and I've probably mentioned this before on the episode, back in 2001 when I went to go pick up Megadeth's World Needs a Hero, and that was the same day Lateralis came out. And man, that album was huge.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like, so clearly, they had a substantially large fan base looking for their music. And I understand the reluctance to wanting to put your stuff streaming. I mean, you're basically saying, hey, people should get to listen to my music for free. This thing that I was charging people $20 for earlier. But I think when you think of like video games, you can only charge $70 for a video game for so many years until it gets marked down. I mean, granted, in the new digital landscape, that may not always be the case, but when you're talking traditionally, you eventually have to mark it down to next to nothing for people to want to buy it. And I think that's kind of the same with music. Eventually, you're better off letting people hear it, and hopefully those people do end up becoming big enough fans to want to purchase things from you, whether it be vinyl collectors, boxes, CDs, merch, whatever. You've already made the money off the initial sales.
I think the other thing we've seen specifically from doing this podcast that I think kind of changed my perceptions on some of this is a lot of these bands that we review each and every week. Yes, they'll release an album. It came out October the 4th. But when you go back and look at when these singles became available, some of them are 2 years old.
Yeah.
And they're just
stockpiling them.
This single's done. Here it is.
Yeah.
Here, you can download it now. And then they do that for maybe their top 4 or 5 singles on an album. Then it's like, okay, now we've got most of an album done. Let's finish the album. Then we'll release it. So if you're a band with a loyal following, there's almost this constant stream of music coming from you. So it's not that here's a whole album of stuff, because unfortunately when bands get a little farther on in their career, you release one album that's kind of a bomb, and people might just be like, well, I guess I'm moving on from this band because they're clearly not making music I want to hear anymore. Whereas if you hear it maybe one at a time, maybe it's a little more of a gradual okay, this is kind of what they're going to sound like, and that's fine, as opposed to just kind of getting it all at once. And there's no question that whether you like what streaming has done to the music industry or not, and there's certainly a lot of negatives to it, the reality is it's there. And it's Chris saying that the alligator's been pretty tame since Urban Meyer left. Very true. It's there, and if you don't take advantage of it, somebody else is. And I think that's kind of where the lament comes from. Even though, like you said, had they just released more albums or just been constantly releasing EPs or something to just kind of keep people coming back for new music, maybe it doesn't completely mitigate not having your stuff available digitally, but it's certainly going to help because people are constantly getting something from you.
I also wonder, too, and I'll never know this, when they did decide to finally let these streaming services use their music, did that give them some sort of weird, priority position in the algorithm where, if I have some sort of modern rock or 2000s rock playlist or station set up, it just automatically is like, let's give them Tool now. Let's throw a bunch of Tool. I'm curious.
Well, and maybe. I mean, that certainly could have happened. I think the other thing, too, because, it mentions in the article about how everything charted all of a sudden. And, of course, 99% of that is all your fans just, hey, all this stuff's coming out. Let's grab it before they change their mind. And let's go out and get it all digitally. So, yeah, of course it's going to chart. And
they did have that album in 2019. I'm sure that also gave some renewed interest in their back catalog that now people could finally get on iTunes or Spotify or whatever.
Yeah. And, again, nobody will ever be able to be sure that maybe they lost out on some fans by not having it available digitally. But I think, when you get to a certain point, it's hard to fight the trend. You have to just go ahead and do what everybody in the music industry is doing, even if it's not something you're crazy about. And they did eventually come on board, and clearly they're still doing all right. And but it's always an interesting discussion when you start talking about digital music.
The music business is such a weird landscape, and I think kind of the other stories we have, especially the second story, kind of lend to that even further.
Yeah, let's get to that second story. So one thing we do like to talk about on this podcast when it pops up in our feed is these ultimate collections. Some of our favorite bands of all time basically take certain parts of their catalog or all of their catalog and decide to release it, in a lot of cases, in LP form now, because that is the cool thing to do. And so the news comes out that Ozzy Osbourne is releasing See You on the Other Side version 2.0, which is an 18 LP box set. It is basically all of Ozzy's original solo material. There's only 2,000 copies of this going to be pressed, which of course is also going to lead to this giant price tag we're going to tell you about here in a minute. It'll feature 18 total albums, including rarities, compilation album, Flippin' the B-side, as well as recent releases Ordinary Man and Patient Number 9. Super Deluxe box also includes 10 brand new full-size posters of vintage photos, a gold bat vinyl slip mat, and an individually numbered vellum certificate of authority personally signed by Ozzy Osbourne. Obviously, it's everything from Blizzard of Oz in 1980 up to Patient Number 9 in 2022. Price tag on this is $599.
Ouch.
So, yeah, I did the math because I think that's important, and that puts it in at about $33 per LP, which I don't know if that's unreasonable or not. That's going to be a question we can discuss here because obviously this is a very limited edition collection, and I'm sure it will go fast because both music fans of Ozzy and music collectors in general will jump on this knowing that with only 2,000 copies, it's going to be worth something someday, probably in excess of $599. But I guess first off, thoughts on this. Second of all, like, where's the bubble on these special edition LP collections? Because I feel like, and I know you're going to mention it, we've just had one right after the other of late, and at some point, for a technology that is cool but antiquated, I feel like there's a bubble somewhere that's going to burst on this whole thing.
Yeah, and it feels like they're just testing the waters to find out exactly where that bubble is and when it'll actually pop. I'm not going to argue. It's a cool box set.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff they throw in as far as, what was it, like posters, signed certificate of authenticity, the slip mat's cool. But, man, $600. But that being said, I mean, that isn't really any crazier than some of these other ones that we've seen over the past few months. You have the Motley Crue 35th anniversary Dr. Feelgood, which was a loaded box set too. Like the stuff I remember when we talked about it, the stuff they packaged in with it seemed legit, but it's $200, 3 LPs. The Dream Theater Volume 1 vinyl, which is 4 of their albums over 7 LPs, that's $175. U2, How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, just that album over 8 LPs for whatever reason is $308. Ooh. And finally, probably the biggest head scratcher to me is Green Day's American Idiot 20th anniversary, 8 LP. Why? First off, why do we need to celebrate American Idiot? Secondly, why does that album need 8 records? But it's $200. So clearly they know that this is like a niche market of hyper insane collectors. And I think they're still just trying to push it to see how far people are willing to go with it. I'd seen an article, which was later corrected. It was on Tech Radar, talking about vinyl sales being down 33% year over year. Evidently, the company that Billboard uses for their data analytics contacted them saying that those factors or those figures weren't right. Something about whatever they were using, the numbers were collected differently, so you couldn't really compare them. And evidently, sales are up 6%, which that kind of seems suspicious anyway. But the point of the article that I thought made more sense was just the price of vinyl increasing over the years. And I think you're going to reach a point where the novelty's cool and all, but this is still kind of a substandard way to own the music.
I think if you're going to get something on vinyl, you have to have the option to get the digital version as well, because I would not want to buy an 18 LP box if that's the only way I own that material, because that is so inconvenient. I can't just pop, hey, there's one song on one album that I want to listen to. Let me pull my record player out. Let me load up this record. It's just, there's so many steps when otherwise I could just pull it up on my phone and listen to it that way.
I'm going to need a way to listen to it in my car.
Yeah, and I don't think they're selling cars with record players in them.
That'd be awesome. But
get Exhibit on that.
Anti-skip technology. It's like the old Discman days.
Yes, indeed. But I think, I could see where LP sales are still up because we see, again, with a lot of these newer bands on their Bandcamp pages, a lot of them offer these LPs as a bonus. Again, not the only way you get it. You usually get a digital copy or a CD or something along with it. So, it is pretty popular, and evidently they found a way to produce new LPs relatively cheaply so they can do something like that, we've seen I know there are niche websites that have LP collections of classic albums, so that's pretty cool.
I did see just recently the website through which I got the Trick or Treat soundtrack, Real Gone Music, started taking pre-orders on the soundtrack to Stephen King's Silver Bullet.
Oh, wow.
Which is a classic movie. I don't know if I need the soundtrack, but it looked really cool.
That sounds like something Dad would enjoy. But so that stuff's really cool. But when you get to these mega collections that are hundreds of dollars, I don't know. I don't know where the limit is on those, and so we're gonna find out because this is not going to be the last of them, and probably not the last one we're going to talk about on this podcast. But and if you're out there and you buy one of these collections, let us know what you think. Or do you have a big LP collection? Are you building an LP collection? Let us know. Stop by on Sunday Night Chat with us. We want to know who's out there buying all these because they're really cool. But again, I wonder about the cost and the value with some of those sorts of things. One more story this week, and that is regarding Static X, which continues to, chug right along as it turns out. And the talk about a release in 2025, a documentary called Evil Disco, The Rise, Fall, and Regeneration of Static X. Of course, we just talked about Static X last week because in the vault for 1999, we talked about Wisconsin Death Trip. It was one of the albums that I spotlighted when I went through my 1999. That 25th anniversary, obviously, this year. And I kind of want to let you talk a little bit more about this because I know, again, this is a band that you've followed a lot closer than I have over the years. And obviously, we talk a lot about these bands that kind of continue to exist after either members leave or members pass away. In this case, you're talking about Wayne Static himself. But the way they have honored him in their continuation almost feels unique and somehow heartwarming compared to maybe some of the other bands that we talk about each and every week.
Yeah, for sure. To read this article, and a lot of it's involving an interview that they had done with Tony Campos, the bassist for the band, you really get a feeling of just how important Wayne was to the band and even other acts and other people within kind of that scene. They mentioned the documentary is going to be a look back at the history of the band and Wayne and how he affected all their lives. It's still probably the best way that you can continue on after the passing of not just your lead singer, but really just what you think of when you think of the band. I remember seeing the video for Push It the first time, and it was just hard to not gravitate toward Wayne Static. The dude had such an insane look. He just looked nuts. And, for them to go on essentially with Edsel Dope playing this fictional Zero character who's clearly like a reincarnation of Wayne to some degree.
Despite the fact he says he's not that character.
Yeah, he denies it. They even went as far, someone showed a picture of Zero who clearly had the same neck tattoo as Edsel Dope, and he came out and said that was obviously Photoshopped. So it's like, this guy who we all know is the guy doing it, plays along with this idea that it isn't him and that he wouldn't sing for them because, it's not his band. And it's amazing to me that's the way they're handling, especially in comparison to some of these other bands who have lost lead singers and how or really important members of the band and they've kept on without them. One interesting way to look at it, their bassist said that, he keeps coming back to this Iron Maiden analogy where basically Wayne isn't just their Bruce Dickinson. He's also their Eddie. He was the mascot of the band. So they had to come up with some sort of way if they were going to continue on to really honor his energy and vibe and legacy. And I'm excited to see the documentary because I think it'll give you an even better look at kind of why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting and again, kind of unique in the music world because obviously we've talked a lot about bands that have lost members and some of them just stop altogether. I mean, you think of a band like Rush, like when Neil Peart passed away, that was it. Like they were done. And even though every so often you'll hear rumors about, hey, these guys are going to maybe go back out on tour, like it hasn't happened. And obviously they're not getting any younger.
No.
But these guys do it almost as it's like being a tribute band, but also being the original band. It's like they're honoring him by continuing on with this new character, but doing it in a way that's not at all disrespectful. In fact, it's an homage to his life.
Yeah.
And, it takes a lot of work to be able to pull that off and have people kind of resonate with it, and their fans absolutely have. And yeah, this documentary is going to be really fascinating. I'm really interested to watch it, to kind of get to know him a little better, because clearly, more so than just the front man that we saw, he clearly had such an impact on all of their lives behind the scenes that this makes total sense to them to basically continue on this way. So really cool. Definitely check that out. Check out that story. And when we get a little closer to the release of that documentary, we'll certainly talk more about it. That's our news headlines for this week. Good time to remind you, check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can listen to previous episodes of the Nerdcast Empire. You can check out our store. All that good stuff on our website, nerdcastempire.com. We're all over social media, something I haven't really talked about on the podcast, but obviously we're on X, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on TikTok. I have started posting on Blue Sky because I know a lot of VTubers are going over there, and since like 90% of our followers on X are VTubers, might as well go ahead and post it over there. Like, we're everywhere and anywhere, and the thing that you're going to see showing up in all those places is some shorts that Mike has created, or reels, or whatever they're called on that particular social media.
Minute-long doses of greatness.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Basically, he's condensed down these music weeklies into 1 minute long clips of the songs that we pick, the bands that we pick, and also has started to kind of create some for the Vault. He's got some on his own YouTube channel as well. So it'll be a way to kind of get a small dose. And if you see those out in the wild, please share them, because the more our reach gets spread, the better chance we have to continue to grow this thing. And again, as I mentioned even in our post today to announce the episode, if you stop by and join us live, or you stop by on Twitch and join check out on the VOD, please follow us. No obligation to do anything other than just to click the follow button, and we really would appreciate it. It doesn't cost you a dime, but it will help us as we can continue to try to work toward 50 followers on Twitch that allow us to monetize and do all other kinds of cool things that we can do here on Twitch on the Nerdcast Empire. So that's my sales pitch for today. It means it's time to talk about what's coming up next. Obviously, Thursday, we've got Anime Thursdays. I think we're going to be doing music again this week. We're going to be talking
About OhioCon.
Probably talking about OhioCon. If they have more news between now and then, because we've kind of exhausted all the news, I think. So they're going to have to actually do something over the next 5 days.
Hey, if Fluffy wants to come on here and talk to us, we'll do that.
I don't have to check with his meal schedule to make sure that's going to work out okay. But we'll see. We'll do. I know we're going to be doing music for sure on Thursday. We'll have headlines as well. So join us 7 o'clock Eastern. I believe it'll be on time on Thursday. And then next Sunday, we will have Music Weekly. Don't know what time it's going to be. It's probably going to be at like 6 o'clock Eastern or 6:30 Eastern.
6:05.
Or maybe 6:05 Eastern. We'll have the music of October the 11th. There's an NXT Premium Live event next Sunday, Halloween Havoc. So we will be a little earlier next Sunday. I also have an exhibition basketball game to go to in the afternoon. So we're going to squeeze it in there, but it's probably going to be like in the 6 to 6:30 range. We'll let you know Thursday exactly what time. We'll get it all pinned down. But join us next Sunday for another episode of Music Weekly. With that said, it's time to get to the new stuff. And as I mentioned, and I'll go ahead, while I'm rambling about this, I will go ahead and post the link in the chat. Of course, each and every week, Mike will go through a couple of different music sources and will pick out some of the best rock and metal releases, put them on, and some of the worst, in fact, also, put them on a giant list, and then pull a song from each of those releases. He'll go through, rank all of these, kind of what's good, what's bad. We go through, check them out, and then at the end of the weekend, we each pick 2 new releases that we really like that we want to share with you. These are the releases of October the 4th. And on the playlist, you can go through everything Mike has pulled. So if there's a couple songs on there that you like, let us know. And we'll certainly shout you out on the podcast, because everybody's got different music tastes. But these are the things we like. Each and every week we pick 2. And then, of course, in the last segment of the show, we go into the Vault, where we'll talk about a couple of classic albums you need to check out. But it's time to get to the new music. As always, Mike, you will lead things off. A couple of interesting choices this week for sure. Definitely very different bands, the 2 bands you've chosen, but both good in kind of their own separate ways. But what do you have for us first for your first new pick of the week?
Yeah, so for my first new pick, I went with a band that I kind of wish I would have checked out sooner, to be honest. I'd heard their name around, and I know that they run a metal festival that I'd learned about a few months back. But all that being said, this is the latest EP from the Madison, Wisconsin-based power metal band. The band is Lords of the Trident, and the EP is the VG EP.
Yeah, people need to check this out. Actually, just need to check out their stuff in general. These guys are super talented, and this is really good stuff you got for us here.
Yeah, these guys are just kind of impressive in general as far as what they do, both on like running the Mad with Power Festival, also kind of their own business model where they have this pretty well built out Patreon thing going on. This EP itself was originally a Patreon exclusive, now available on Bandcamp. The band started in 2005. Ty Christian and Akira Shimada and Brian Cole got together on the studio project. Eventually, it grew out into a live touring band. From what I could tell, they got 7 studio albums and 4 EPs. They also have really fun pseudonyms that they perform under. Ty Christian is Fang von Rathenstein. Akira Shimada is Akira Metal. And Brian Cole, who I don't believe is with the band any longer, was Socrates of Shred. Current lineup consists of Fang von Rathenstein on vocals, Akira on guitar, Baron Torian Helishar on guitar, Pontifex Mortis on bass, and Master Hercule Schlagzeuger on drums.
So is that Dead Pope?
Yes, I believe so.
Pontifex Mortis? Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of those, historically speaking.
Absolutely.
But yeah, on top of just playing over-the-top power metal, they have this really cool Patreon, which I checked out. I haven't joined it, but from as little as like $1 a month, you can get Discord access, a link to like their once-a-year private concert stream, and as well as other content. It goes all the way up to $15 a month, where you get digital and physical copies of everything they release, sheet music and tabs delivered monthly to you, thank you credit in any albums they release, behind the scenes live stream access to any concert that they can stream, 2 T-shirts a year. Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Membership pin, video calls, I think twice a year, if I remember right, and more. So they definitely got this thing worked into like a business. And kind of talking about our news stories earlier, I just think that's kind of where the music business is for a lot of these bands. It's no different than content creation. If you can get people in on a monthly subscription to what you do, bonus.
Yeah, for sure, because it's, the way you used to do it just doesn't work anymore, but kudos to these guys for figuring out the new way and clearly doing well with it.
Yeah, they must be doing pretty well. Since 2017, they've been running the annual Mad with Power Metal Festival. This festival's seen performances by them, obviously, along with bands like Power Glove, Unleash the Archers, Greyhawk, Psycho Stick, Mega Colossus, who we've talked about numerous times.
Yeah.
And many more. So that's definitely on my list of things I need to check out at some point in time. Going back to this EP, this is an EP inspired by their favorite video games, although it also, oddly enough, has a cover of Valerie by Steve Winwood. I don't know where that fits into the video games, but it's an amazing cover, and people should certainly check it out. It's not a very long EP, so just listen to the entire thing. It's certainly worth it. You have tracks like To Kill a God, Master of Speed, Jet Set City, Valerie, and The Ballad of John Milwaukee, which I believe is a Road Rash reference, which I'm not super familiar with the game, but it's a cool song. That being said, the song that I picked out to listen to on the episode today is the song To Kill a God.
Before we do that, good time to remind you that if you're listening on the podcast version of this podcast, you will not get the music clips. You'll have to check us out on Twitch live on Sundays, on the Twitch VOD, and on YouTube VOD, assuming Twitch and YouTube allow the songs to not be muted. With that being said, my disclaimer is complete. It's time to check out Lords of the Trident, the first song off of their VG EP. It is To Kill a God, so let's check that out now. I mean, these guys are super talented, and everybody probably needs to check this out. I think this is one of the stronger releases we've had all year, even though it's only an EP. Like, these guys are really good, and all the stuff they're doing kind of surrounding these releases is, like you said, really where the music industry is headed. And obviously their festival is something that I would love to go to at some point when the schedule allows, because, well, we talk a lot about power metal on this podcast. So a lot of the bands that have been at this festival are bands that come up each and every week on this podcast. But yeah, these guys are really cool. I've not yet had a chance to listen to the Valerie cover. That's one of my favorite Steve Winwood songs. So
I was going to pick it to play, but I thought, I should probably go with something original to them. But it's a great cover.
Yeah.
Also, if you like covers, if you check out their Bandcamp, they also have covers on there for The Touch, the Stan Bush song from the Transformers movie, which is legendary, as well as Glory of Love from Karate Kid 2, Peter Cetera song.
Yeah.
Both really good covers, worth checking out, and just check out all the stuff from these guys.
Absolutely. Check out Lords of the Trident. Again, their new EP is out, but while you're there, check out everything else they've got, because these guys are super talented. That's your first pick of the week. You've got a second pick as well. A little different direction for pick number 2, but another group that's really talented and has found kind of a different style that has worked really well for them.
Yeah, this was a strange one. Last week I'd highlighted the band High Parasite, and they had this term for their music that they called death pop. I think I found another variation of the death music formula. These guys refer to their music on their Bandcamp as magic metal. Take that for whatever it's worth. This is the second full-length album from the band. They're from Quebec City, Quebec. The band is The Gates, and the album is Of the River Styx.
I mean, their album cover is something everybody should immediately just stop and go check out, because it definitely gives you a vibe for what this is going to sound like, because it is very, very interesting.
I knew it was going to be something special. I wasn't sure what, but I knew it was going to be special. This follows their original full-length album of Pandemonium, as well as an EP and a split album in 2022 and 2023, respectively. The other tags for this band on Bandcamp are metal, black metal, heavy metal, magic metal, occult rock, and psychedelic rock, and I think they're all of that. In the album description, they call out incorporating nods to 80s synth, disco music, and gothic/death rock. So you definitely hear the 80s synth and even some disco in there, but it's still very gothic feeling with the death metal vocals. I mentioned High Parasite. These guys are just on an entirely different planet from that, even though they both have that death thing going on for them. I don't think this sound is going to be for everyone. It's an interesting listen. I could see where some people might think that they rely a little too much on the death vocals, which at times feel like they're at war with the poppy synth music behind them. But I'm a big fan of anyone that tries to find a different direction, and these guys definitely did that. The reviewer on evermetal.com kind of suggests these guys operate on the same musical spectrum as bands like Vexing Hex and Ghost. And I'd agree, but their sound is still very, very different. And certainly more creative than a lot of music that employs the death metal vocals, and I certainly appreciate that. Standout tracks to me were Alone, Disco Mephisto, Stygian Hell, Watchers of the Night Sky, and Blind Descent. And the song that I chose to demo this evening is Disco Mephisto.
So let's check that out now. Again, this is The Gates off of their release Of the River Styx. And this is the third track off of that album, Disco Mephisto. Let's check that out now. Yeah, that is definitely different.
Just hearing that dude's voice, like singing what clearly just sounds like some disco song lyrics, like she moves like a queen.
Yeah, and that's where you have the the disconnect there is, it does sound like it was written for a disco band. And, if I found out that some of these were covers of a disco band, I wouldn't be shocked. And I can see in the chorus when you hear like the melodic parts where they get the Ghost comparisons.
Dude has a very like gothic, like
gothic
almost
pop.
operatic sound to it.
So I totally get that. But yeah, obviously the death vocals set it aside from a band like Ghost. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know if a whole album of this would be necessarily up my alley, but I appreciate what they've tried to do with this because it is so different, and they didn't just so many of the bands we listen to, and you can go through our playlist that Mike posts each and every week, and you'll hear it. There's a lot of death metal vocalists out there that it's just noise, and it's it just either gets lost in the mix of just the whole thing just sounds like it just crumpled the whole thing up in a small silo, or you have this really cool sounding music but the vocals are so bad that it just ruins what could potentially be a good band. Here, they found a way to make the music so distinctive from the death metal vocals that even though that may not be my favorite type of vocals, it somehow works because they're so different that they're not competing with each other for space in the mix, which is where I think death vocals and death music can go wrong when they're all in the same area of the mix and you can't really separate them out.
Yeah. And that's something Evermetal kind of mentioned too in their review, was like, you have the death vocals, but there's really interesting music behind it. It's not the death vocals and it's sounding like that they're just taking their instruments and trying to break them. Like they're actually playing them, so that kind of sets them apart from other bands that maybe have that same vocal style.
Yep.
And I'm always a fan of being able to mix the two. Would I like them to have a little more clean in there? Yeah. I'm talking more like metalcore type stuff, whether it be Trivium or even bands like Scar Symmetry, where they have the death vocals, but they come in with the clean when I want them to, and it works out well. But yeah, I just thought these guys were just way too interesting to not point out.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we look for on this podcast. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we really, really like that fall kind of in the exact area that we want to pick, but every so often you find something that's just way outside of that you want to spotlight because it's important to note that these bands are out there doing great stuff too.
And both of my choices just had phenomenal cover arts for their albums. Just so cool.
I mean, if you want a sure way for us to at least give your album a serious listen, come up with a non-AI driven cover art that is creative, and these guys did that. It's the Gates of the River Styx, the just interesting release from these guys.
Magic metal.
Magic metal, indeed. So check these guys out if you're into that. I think you'll really dig this release. Time for me to get to my two picks this week, and one band that's been around for a long time and has been doing it and just continues to do it well, and the other one that's a little newer by comparison, but honestly is one of my favorite albums I've had the chance to pick all year. We'll get to them second. Let's get to the first one. As you can see in the rundown, it is the Copenhagen, Denmark band DAD, or D-A-D, if you will, formerly Disneyland After Dark, with their new release, Speed of Darkness. They were originally obviously named Disneyland After Dark. When they signed their first U.S. record deal with Warner Brothers in 1989, that is when they changed their name because they knew they were going to get sued.
Yeah.
This is their 13th studio album. It was created to celebrate the band's 40th anniversary, which was in 2022, but obviously it takes a little time to make an album, so this came out in 2024. You see them labeled as like a hard rock and glam metal band. This release doesn't feel as glam as maybe some of their earlier work. It feels just like hard melodic rock, which is awesome. Like, they absolutely nail it. Jesper and Jacob Benzer have been rocking with Stig Peterson and Laus Sona. They've been together as a lineup since 1999, so this band has been together as this unit for a long time. I think people who are fans of glam metal will probably best know them for their 1989 release, No Fuel Left for the Pilgrims. It was listed on Rolling Stone's list of the 50 greatest hair metal albums of all time. So
great album.
But I mean, again, these guys are still getting it done all these years later. Still putting out great music even in 2024. Standout tracks here. The whole album is really good. God Praise to Man, first, second, and third. The Ghost. And the album or the track we're going to listen to is Live by Fire. I always say that wrong. Live by Fire, the 6th track off of this album. So let's check out the latest from DAD. That's Dad. Speed of Darkness. This is the 6th track off of this album, Live by Fire. Let's check this out now. But yeah, I mean, again, these guys have been around forever, and they're still just chugging right along, releasing great music, which is great to see all these years later. Your thoughts on these guys' new release?
Yeah, going through the alphabet for my vault this time around, I was actually going to pick No Fuel Left for the Pilgrims for the letter D, but I really wanted to focus on bands that I didn't own music by, and I've had that album for a while, and it's tremendous. So I may get back to them at some point in time for the vault. When I first started listening to this, my initial thought was, I get the feeling this band has all the same people in it. Just the sound, it sounds so familiar. And, you pull up their Wikipedia and find out that, their vocals, guitars, and bass have been the same throughout. You mentioned they have a new drummer since 1999.
And he's the new guy.
He's the new guy, but he's been around for 25 years. Just consistent and good. You could listen to this right after No Fuel Left for the Pilgrims, and yet it feels newer and probably on a production side probably better, but still sounds like the same old Disneyland After Dark. I was really impressed with this. It took me a while to get back to it because I was trying to find things that I hadn't heard of, but yeah, when I listened to it, I was thoroughly impressed.
And that's what happened for me. I had marked these guys right away because I'm like, well, I know these guys are going to put out a solid release, and then I was looking for a second album, and you had picked one that I had marked, so I got to cross that off the list. There were a couple other ones like, oh, this is decent, but it's just not there. So then I came back to these guys and was really blown away that they just continue to produce great music. So check them out, DAD, like Mike said, formerly known as Disneyland After Dark. Really good stuff from them. Their brand new album released just a couple weeks ago. That was great. I thought this next one might even be even better. This is a release from a band from Germany, found in 2007. This is the New Roses with the album Attracted to Danger. This is their 6th full-length album, and they just got a great classic rock, hard rock, metal mix that makes the album so good. Excuse me. They got a great cover on there of Rockin' in the Free World, which I'm not a huge Neil Young fan, but they did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
This is kind of one of those bands that I've just kind of missed out on because, you look at the excitement about this new album, you look at the reviews of it, like people were just stoked to have this new release and couldn't wait for it, and were just some of these websites where we go on there and it's like 4 stars, 5 stars out of 10, and people hate on it. Like every one of these reviews were super positive, so I was very encouraged. I think the biggest thing about these guys is we've had over the weeks that we've done this podcast, and we've got 36 weeks now, we'll hear these bands that are really good, and then it's like track 1, track 2, track 3, they all sound the same, generally. And it's like, this is still really good, but it's like you wrote the same song 12 times and put it on an album called an album. This band did not do that. Every song on this album sounds different. They had some bluesy rock sounds, like Whiskey in the Backseat and Spirit of a Rebel were very like blues rock sound. And then they bring in Scottish-based vocalist Gil Montgomery to do a song called Hold Me Up, which is basically like a crossover rock country ballad. And it's really good, too. If you're into that type of music, I think that will really hit for you. Again, just incredibly talented, a band that is, it looks like they're still kind of on the way up, and I think that's always exciting when you find a band. It's cool to find a band that's been doing it forever and has had a ton of success. It's also cool to find a band that feels like they're just hitting their stride and maybe great things are still to come for them. And I feel like these guys fall into that category. Standout tracks, I really like this whole album, but if you want to check out When You Fall in Love, Bring the Thunder, Spirit of a Rebel, and the track we're going to listen to, Attracted to Danger, the title track off of this album by the New Roses. So let's check this out now. It is the title track, track number 3 off of the new album from the New Roses. It is Attracted to Danger. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
'Cause I'm attracted.
These guys just blew me away. I mean, every so often we come across albums on this podcast that it just feel like they're on, like everything we listen to is good that we pick for this podcast, but it just feel like there are a handful of bands over the year we've done this that are just on another level, and it feels like these guys fall into that category. I was super impressed by it. Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this album too. This week was kind of weird in that you had numerous acts that at times had like a certain like either country or southern rock flavor to them. I feel like these guys did it the most subtly where it wasn't a big part of their sound, but you could hear it on occasion. I mean, you also had Sebastian James with an album that had a song called White Trash, which that song was fine. Texas Hippie Coalition had another one that was very kind of leaning into the rednecky thing. A band like the Native How had their album, which was basically like bluegrass meets thrash metal, which was also really interesting. And I didn't pick them, but on top of that album, I ran into a cover they did of, it was this mashup of Man of Constant Sorrow and Harvester of Sorrow. Really kind of a wild thing and worth a listen. But yeah, I feel New Roses kind of dabbled into that a little bit without sacrificing the rock, and for that reason, I certainly preferred that.
Yeah, for sure. I do like Southern rock to a point. There is a point where it's almost a little too Southern, but no, these guys really nailed it. And again, if we're talking Southern rock, these guys are from Germany. So again, it's another band that's not
Southern Germany.
Yes, maybe. I don't know. Another band, not a U.S. band, but also kind of tapping into U.S. music culture, which is always fascinating to me, and we've had that a few times over the weeks and months on this podcast. So definitely check those guys out. The New Roses, really impressed with Attracted to Danger. That wraps up our new music this week. It's time to head into the vault, where Mike and I will give you classic albums you should check out. And I did check out Mike's classic vault pick this week, and we'll get to your gimmick in a moment and just remind everybody what we're doing. But this was a band I had never heard of. An album that I'd never heard before, and I know I came away really impressed having listened to this today. Definitely curious to hear about your vault pick. Let us know how we got here and what we've got this week.
Yeah, so we are now on to the letter I of the current gimmick, which is going through the alphabet and picking a band for each letter that is on the Wikipedia entry for list of glam metal bands. Obviously, whether these bands are really glam metal or not, irrelevant. It's just the list I'm using. So
correct.
Yeah, the letter I was interesting because there were only 2 bands listed. One band, It's Alive, which I did not pick, and the band that I ultimately did pick was a Phoenix, Arizona-based hard rock glam metal band, or I should say is one. They are still active according to Wikipedia. But this is their second album. It is from 1985. The album is Night of the Crime, and the band is called Icon.
Again, you listen to this and think, why weren't these guys a bigger deal?
Why have I never heard of this?
Why have I never heard of this? Because this is exactly the type of music I listen to all the time. Why was this not more in the forefront? And you always wonder what happened that this fell through the cracks. But this album is really good.
Yeah, it's weird because if this album came out in 1991, I would understand why it fell through the cracks. But this is 1985. This is their second album. This is still well within that era where, you know, melodic hard rock and glam metal and hair metal, that stuff was thriving. So there was really no reason, especially when you look at some of the names involved on the production side and the writing side of this album. It was an A-plus effort for sure. I still don't really know what happened. That being said, kind of going a little more into the band, they started in 1979 under the name The Schoolboys, and in 1981 became Icon. The classic lineup is currently with the band, presuming the Wikipedia entry is as up to date. We have Dan Wexler on guitars, Stephen Clifford on vocals, Tracy Wallach on bass, John Aquilino on guitar and backing vocals, and Pat Dixon on drums. This album was produced by Eddie Kramer, who's worked with a who's who of just classic rock royalty from Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, David Bowie, Rolling Stones, Zeppelin, Clapton, Kiss, John Mellencamp, Carlos Santana. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you also had on the production side Mike Klink, who was a mixing assistant on this album, but he went on to produce Appetite for Destruction for Guns N' Roses, Megadeth's Rust in Peace, Motley Crue's New Tattoo, Survivor's When Seconds Count, Triumph's The Sport of Kings. And this album is just pure AOR greatness. It's so polished and sounds so good. To this day, there are plenty of outlets for that era of music, whether it be satellite radio or streaming services, but I've never encountered this band, and I still really don't know why. I know after this album, their lead singer did leave for a while, and they went through some lineup issues, ultimately broke up, and then got back together in 2008, but during kind of their heyday, I still don't really understand why they didn't become a bigger deal.
I don't know either. And I'll let you kind of talk about your top picks in a moment, but the only thing I can figure, having listened to the album, is this album to me feels like the description of a jack of all trades and a master of none. Like every song on this album is really good, but I don't know if there's a single on this album. Like, I don't know if there's that one song that's like, okay, this one is on this level way better. Like, it's clearly the radio hit. Like, I think any of them could have been a radio hit, but if I'm trying, and obviously we're just guessing because there's no information as to why this band didn't take off, but if I had to just guess in hindsight, maybe that was it, then possibly the record label just didn't find one of these tracks that would hit and throw it out on the radio, because, I mean, this album was... I know you'll probably mention the Kerrang, the big German metal magazine. Their readers said it was one of the best AOR albums of all time in 1988, behind Journey and Michael Bolton. So I mean,
that's some pretty rough competition.
It is, but it's like, if the quality in their readers' minds are in that same ballpark, it's like why did they not end up on the radio right alongside those two bands?
Yeah, and that's the only thing I wonder, too, to your point, is if it was just a matter of there were so many big acts at that point in time. Nothing about their songs really stood out enough to dethrone Rat or any Bon Jovi or any of the other really big names at that point in time. Standout tracks for me included Naked Eyes, Missing, Danger Calling, really awesome song, Shot at My Heart, Out for Blood, Hungry for Love, just a really cool album from top to bottom.
Yeah, and if you're a fan of the music that we play on this podcast, I encourage you to go find this. You can stream it on YouTube Music. It's out there. I don't know what it would cost to buy the album in physical form.
I found it on Amazon. I guess it's been re-released a couple times, with remastered, but you can get it for $15.
So very reasonable. Can I get it in 8 LPs though? Is there
maybe? Now I did see some of the Amazon comments for the album talk about how this album, being their second album, was definitely more like AOR-ish than their first one, which was heavier. And a lot of people, as far as the comments went, preferred the original of the first album.
That's interesting.
But those people still really loved this one. So I just kind of wonder how that came about, as far as the decision to go for a more radio-friendly sound. I
mean, maybe there wasn't a hit on the first album either, and they thought, hey, we gotta try to... hey, we sell out. We're going to go mainstream here.
They did bring in Bob Halligan Jr. to write on the album, which that guy has written for a lot of crazy people, too. Numerous times he's worked with Judas Priest on albums, Screaming for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith, Halford's solo album, and Priest's most recent Invincible Shield that came out this year. He's written with Kix, Blue Oyster Cult, Cher, Kiss, Helix, and Bonfire. So that guy's been around quite a while, too. So, again, no shortage of writing and production power went into this.
Yeah, and that's why it sounds so polished for sure. It is a almost perfection of recording and mixing and mastering. You can hear it. I want to go back and listen to their first album now because now I'm kind of curious to see what that sounds like in comparison.
I think you can get them both for like $30.
That's not bad. So
Let's see.
But no, I really enjoyed this. I think it's really great stuff. I'm kind of bummed that these guys didn't hit because I would have definitely dug this music in the late 80s, early 90s when I was really getting into music. But fortunately, we found them now, which is...
and I think that's kind of the fun of this whole Vault project is just finding bands that, even though all these bands, for the most part, were kind of before my time, we're talking, I was 3 years old when this came out, it's just history kind of forgot them as far as if you're watching MTV talking about the days of hair metal, they don't talk about Icon, and that's a shame, and it's cool that we now have the means to find this stuff, discover it, and source it, and enjoy it like we could have 40 years ago.
Yeah, no question about it. So definitely check out Night of the Crime, Mike's Vault pick from Icon. Definitely recommended. Really enjoyed this album. We are now into the 2000s, actually the year 2000 to be exact, on my Vault picks, if you will, as we go through the years. We started all the way back in 1969 with Chicago.
How did you not have the Conan O'Brien soundbite there?
Oh, in the year 2000. That's a good question. We could dig that up, but
the future.
Yeah, that's the future. That's that's a classic.
In the year 2000.
Oh, that's great. Missed opportunity for sure, but no, we started back in 1969 with Chicago Transit Authority. We're all the way up to 2000. We're going to do this through the year 2010, and then we're going to jump kind of back and talk about songs that were kind of stand out in that time that maybe the whole album didn't get picked, but there were songs that I really liked. So we don't want to get too recent on the Vault. So we're gonna jump back once we get to 2010. But that's still 10 weeks away. So we still got a few more picks in the Vault to go. Let's run down some of the ones that I kind of picked for honorable mention. And even then, I already know there's a couple that I missed on as I was going through these lists. So we'll let Mike clean those up at the end. Obviously, the debut studio album from the American heavy metal band Disturbed came out in 2000, The Sickness, which included Stupefied, Down with the Sickness, Voices, and The Game, which obviously a little crossover there. But, it's, that's an album I easily could have picked as my overall pick because, they were another band, like Buckcherry, like... some of these other bands in that era that I was really getting into heavier music, and this was a really great release to come out of the gate with. How they've evolved since then, we'll kind of get into that in future years. But obviously, this album did very well. Spent 106 weeks on the chart, so it charted really into 2002, which is pretty impressive. Godsmack's Awake came out in 2000. Of course, Awake, Bad Magic, Greed, Sick of Life on this album. Maybe not the success that the original Godsmack album was, but still a really good album. I have to mention this, even though I know I wasn't a fan of it at the time.
Yeah,
but,
nor was I.
And obviously not... I don't like this as much as a lot of the other things I'm going to talk about, but there is a classic nature to it, unfortunately. It is Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water, the third studio album from Limp Bizkit. Included, obviously, Take a Look Around, My Generation, Rollin', My Way. I'm pretty sure we bought this for Rachel for Christmas because of Rollin'. Still one of the best Christmas presents on our gag gift.
Obviously. Yeah.
You're talking about this. Rachel's a huge fan of Limp Bizkit, but, I'm not a huge fan of Limp Bizkit, obviously, but this is probably their most, if not their most important album, certainly one of their most important albums. But that was a 2000 release. Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory came out in 2000, included One Step Closer, Crawling, Paper Cut, and In the End. Huge album, obviously, from those guys, their debut album. It's amazing how many of these debut albums from these bands were just monster hits. That was a huge one. It was released in October of 2000. The Better Life, which was the debut studio album from Three Doors Down. Included Kryptonite, Loser, Duck and Run, Be Like That. Again, I mean, they were huge at this very moment, and that was a really good album.
I just remember Kryptonite being on the radio a lot, especially like around tennis season that year. So it would have been spring.
Yeah.
Just the song was everywhere.
Single came out in January, so that would be about right time-wise.
Yeah.
Because it would have probably really started hitting like mainstream radio play in March or April. But Loser was a good song as well.
Yeah.
So definitely worth talking about. Jumping to the Japanese side of releases, Mike Hiraki's debut album came out in 2000, Delicious Way. Song that probably most anime fans will know off of this album is Secret of My Heart, which is one of the ending themes to Detective Conan.
Yep.
She would go on to sing 20 more ending themes for Detective Conan during her career. But this album is the 5th highest selling album by a female artist in Japan, behind 3 entries by Hikaru Utada and 1 by Ayumi Hamasaki. So it is.
Where's Lisa?
Well, that's a good question. Well, and that makes you wonder, like, is the single release method the way they do things now, like maybe hurt her
That could be.
ability to chart album wise? But huge release from Mike Hiraki. I really like her music, and it's interesting because, you start with Secret of My Heart, which is kind of slow and melodic. And then you get into like some of the techno stuff that she does with some of the later opens and ends. Totally different, but she's had a huge career, obviously. Another album that I was re-listening to today that I really love, it's Infinite, the album by Stradivarius. You think about tracks that defined me getting into this type of music. Hunting High and Low, the first track off of this, the video that you had found off of some TV stations, music channel.
I don't even know where. I
Yerky or something.
I assume I must have downloaded that off of some file sharing site, because it would have been before YouTube, really. But man, I don't remember where I got that. But yeah, it was some random
MTV
show
like
or something. Crazy.
That song was amazing, and that video was amazing.
I believe that video from that show is on YouTube.
That's great. I love it. So definitely check those guys. Stradivarius is amazing. That's an amazing album. Definitely worth talking about. The Savage Poetry. This is a re-release. There's not a lot of hits off of this album, but I do want to bring it up because it is the re-recording of the demo by Ed Guy in 2000. The demo came out in 1995. So they changed some of the stuff up a little bit, re-recorded it, released it. We're going to talk about Ed Guy again next week for sure. Could very well be the number 1 pick next week. Because Mandrake's going to come out in 2001, and we'll be talking about them. But I did want to mention this because it kind of felt like this laid the groundwork for what was going to be these guys really taking off in the 2000s. Last honorable mention, if you will, had to mention it. The band Fozzy had their debut album in 2000. Of course, because it's kind of a crossover on our podcast. Mostly covers. But it's a band fronted by former WWE superstar, now AEW wrestler Chris Jericho. Of course, credited as Moongoose McQueen, according to Wikipedia. I know you're going to talk a little bit more about them with their future release, so we won't get too deep into that.
Yeah, I thought their second album was a bit stronger.
Yeah, so... but yeah, they got started in 2000, which is kind of hard to believe. That's 24 years ago. We talk about on this podcast, like when we make these vault picks, obviously you have a very specific gimmick at the moment, but kind of where I'm at, it's not always this is the best release of the year, although this is a really great release, but it's kind of the release that kind of most impact us at this time. So it's why when I made my vault pick, I had to go with Billy Joel's live 2 CD sets, 2000 Years, the Millennium Concert, released on May 31st, 2000, was certified gold. Obviously, the reason this is so big is because I was at that concert. It was recorded December 31st, 1999 at Madison Square Garden in New York. The first time I ever traveled like that for a concert. We'll leave out discussing who I was with at that time at that concert. But it was still to this day one of the best concerts I've ever seen. It was darn near 3.5 hours of music. He did the first set and then took a break, and then about 11:30 came back out, started a second set, played through the new year. And of course, this was when Y2K was a thing. Everybody was kind of wondering, like, is this it? We're going to, everything's going to stop working at midnight, and, what's going to happen with the world? Turns out none of that happened. So it was fine. But, both albums are amazing. His live stuff, he's so good live, even to this day. I mean, for those who have satellite radio, the Billy Joel channel just came back on Channel 17. They're playing, which I've not had the chance to listen to yet, they're playing in its entirety his last show at Madison Square Garden, where he set the record for however many hundreds of days of residency he did at Madison Square Garden. And the funny thing about that is that was earlier this year. We've seen some clips from it because Axl Rose came out and sang on stage with him, which he still sounds great.
Yeah.
When this concert happened in 1999 into 2000, there were rumors that this was it. Like he was doing this show and that was it. He was hanging it up. And he even kind of addressed it during the show that, there have been a lot of rumors about what was going to happen. But, he said he wasn't done. He wasn't hanging it up. But it's funny because that was 24, almost 25 years ago. And he can not only continued to play live shows, but has sold out live shows. But, again, live album's great. It's a mix of his greatest hits with some cover songs. Got a good cover of like Honky Tonk Woman, which again, not a big Rolling Stones guy, but they did a good job with that. Dance to the Music from Sly Stone. But I mean, it's all of his hits. The CD's really, really good. The concert was amazing. Had some special guests as well, but again, because I was there, which I don't know if I've ever or since had the chance to be at a concert that was recorded for a live album.
I don't even know if I would know, to be honest. Like, sometimes they mention it, sometimes they don't.
Right. So, again, really amazing night. One of those things that, two things from that is, number one, if you're someone who is, young enough that you've got the expendable income to just go to a concert or go to an event, do it, because the memories will be way more than the money you spent on it. And number two, go see live music, because there's just no better way to experience your favorite bands than live. Concerts are the best, and I hope people keep getting out there to see them, because this was just kind of on another level. But thoughts about this, thoughts about other things that I missed from the year 2000, because obviously I know there was a bunch more stuff.
Well, I think the other thing is that if you have a chance to go to New York City, do it in the year 2000.
It's true.
Not 2024.
I saw the Twin Towers.
In
2000, which is
Big Boss Man and Andre the Giant.
Which that's the crazy
legendary tag team.
That's the crazy thing too. Is that was little under 2 years away from 9/11.
Yeah,
it's like. And honestly, I don't know how much I've told the story on the podcast before, but I really felt most of the time completely safe in New York, because it was New Year's Eve. It was, there were police literally everywhere. So it was no real danger. Madison Square Garden was really cool. It's been renovated since, so I'm sure it's even cooler now. But, I don't recommend staying in Newark. That was not great. There's definitely some other parts of that trip that didn't, not ideal, but no, it was definitely worth it for sure. Other stuff from 2000, or just any general thoughts on Billy Joel, because obviously that dude, it's crazy that he's just continued to play live.
The question that I just have to wonder is, like, how many more times has he become bankrupt over the course of that time?
Is he still making up ground? I don't know.
You never know.
Obviously, he had issues where his family kind of scammed him out of money, which from the old Behind the Music many, many years ago.
God, I miss those. They really need to just go back and redo all of those episodes. Like, you know how out of date they are at this point?
Completely out of date in many cases.
I bet Megadeth has doubled the amount of members they've had in their band since the Behind the Music.
For sure.
I mean, that was probably 2001 or 2002 or something like that.
Yeah.
Just ridiculous.
But,
so 2000 had a lot of really good new music. Hymns, Razorblade Romance, classic album. I didn't realize that there was... I mean, I knew there was something weird about my version of it because it was a 2-disc set with a live CD too. But they also included Your Sweet 666 on the UK and the US version, which was on his original album to begin with. Probably my favorite album of the year, Demons and Wizards, their self-titled first album.
That is a great album.
Great side project of Blind Guardian and Iced Earth, Hansi Kirsch and John Schaefer. Tracks like Heaven Denies, Poor Man's Crusade, Blood on My Hands, Tear Down the Wall. while my friends were listening to Limp Bizkit, I was listening to that, like just epic over-the-top power metal.
Sure.
So that tells you something.
You have bad friends, evidently.
Really bad music taste, if nothing else. Got to mention Nickelback's The State came out. This was kind of the precursor to them becoming huge.
Yeah.
But really good album. Had songs like Breathe and Leader of Men on it. The last Pantera album, Reinventing the Steel, came out. The Wikipedia mentions, it's the last album. And then kind of like talks about them as if they're still going on, which I guess technically they are, but it's just, without the Abbotts, it's hard to really feel that way.
Right.
You mentioned Stradivarius Infinite, definitely a top 5 album of the year for me. And Hunting High and Low is great, but also had songs like Millennium, Phoenix, Million Light Years Away, Infinity, Celestial Dream. Iron Maiden's Brave New World, the return of Bruce Dickinson, who had left in 1993. I remember seeing the video for The Wicker Man on that, and just blew my mind, and just a really cool album. I do kind of have to mention Kid Rock's The History of Rock because of the song American Badass, but not because of that song necessarily. It was the parody of it that Stevie Rochelle did, American Hair Band, which is how I first heard of Stevie Rochelle, and then ultimately his band Tough, which was a really cool hair band back in the day. Alice Cooper's Brutal Planet was kind of Alice's either interpretation of nu metal or his reaction to it. It was definitely like more stripped down, kind of felt like something that would have come out in the year 2000, but really cool stuff. Songs like Brutal Planet, Sanctuary, Blow Me a Kiss, Cold Machines. Let's see. One that I didn't initially, to be honest, I haven't heard the album, but it had a huge song on it. The Core's album In Blue came out with Breathless, which
was huge.
Was another song that was just crazy huge. You mentioned Ed Guy, great album there. Another one of my top 5, AFI's The Art of Drowning. Really cool, kind of horror punk type sound. Songs like The Lost Souls of Greetings and Goodbyes, The Days of the Phoenix, Catch a Hot One, Wester. Just really good stuff. Hammerfall's Renegade, with tracks like Templars of Steel, Renegade, Always Will Be. Megadeth's Greatest Hits, Capital Punishment came out. Not necessarily noteworthy, except it did have the songs Kill the King and Dread and the Fugitive Mind on it. Let's see. What else do we have? Probably the other really big one would be Halloween's The Dark Ride.
Yeah.
Tracks like Mr. Torture, All Over the Nations, Escalation 666, If I Could Fly, The Departed, and The Dark Ride. Just great album, but what you'd expect from Halloween.
Yeah. I mean, again, just a ton of albums, and it's almost impossible when you're listing these. And there are many more, too. Each week, there's just so many good albums, but just a quick rundown of what we had for the year 2000, which means it is time to bring this week's episode to a close. We appreciate everybody joining us once again for another episode of Music Weekly. Again, we'll be back first on Thursday night when we're going to be talking a little bit of anime news and anime music. That'll be coming up Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on the Nerdcast Empire. And then we'll be back with another episode of Music Weekly, probably at like 6 Eastern. I'll let you know. We'll post it on social media. We'll mention it Thursday. The music of October the 11th coming up next week, so looking forward to getting into that. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to Mike for putting all this together each and every week. Big thanks to Chris for joining us. Shout out to Chris. A lot of stuff going on with him right now. Obviously, wish him the best, and obviously he'll be rejoining us when he can, when life kind of settles down a little bit for him. But we're always great to have him along in the chat, kind of holding the chat down for us. We'll be back again Thursday night, another episode of the Nerdcast Empire. Until then, for Chris and Mike and the entire crew, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.